So in macroeconomics, we care a lot about unemployment rate, inflation rate, and GDP or production. They're the main measures of how healthy or unhealthy the economy is. But what types of unemployment are there? Are there worse and better types? Is there a natural rate of unemployment? Should we expect there to be zero unemployment ever in the economy? Those are fine questions. Let's get started. So let's think about the categories or types of unemployment and this idea of the natural rate of unemployment. First and foremost, to answer the question of should there ever be zero unemployment? No. Some employment is natural. We've never had below 2.9% unemployment in the US. The three types of unemployment, frictional, structural, and cyclical. Let's take a look at those. So it's worth noting that the US is a very dynamic jobs creation and destruction machine, as you would expect for a more free market capitalist version of the mixed economy that we have. There's just a lot of churning that happens, right? People coming in and out of being employed and unemployed, people coming in and out of being unemployed and not in the labor force, people coming in and out of being employed and not in the labor force. It's pretty dynamic, that's all. One of the happiest types of unemployment, if it's possible to be happy about being unemployed, is frictional unemployment. That time that it takes you to find your ideal job, or at least a job that's kind of well suited to you and not a totally bad crap fit, that's frictional unemployment. And it takes a while for this guy to realize that being a butcher is his jam. It takes a while for this guy to realize that being in the military is his jam. Takes her a while to realize that being a woman of the cloth is her jam. So I guess we want to say it's a natural type of unemployment. We expect an economy to have it, and we expect there to always be some frictional unemployment. The second type of unemployment, which is markedly less happy, is called structural unemployment. Now there's a lot here. Basically, it's the idea that there is enough jobs in an economy, but just not in the right area. So in a particular labor market, there's either more people looking for jobs than are currently available, or the wage rate is simply too high. Some ideas here are like when companies outsource to another country for lower wages, that leaves the people in the US who used to do the job structurally unemployed. Other causes can be labor unions, although they're not nearly as powerful as they used to be. Very few Americans belong to labor unions. This can push up wages, and that can mean that there's more people willing to work at that wage than jobs exist at that wage. Efficiency wage is another interesting idea here. The idea is that some firms will pay higher than market equilibrium wages to get certain things like less employee turnover or more productivity or whatever. Other things so obviously when the wage is too high, there's more people that want to work than are jobs at that wage. That can cause structural unemployment. And then finally, you can get government policies, all sorts of government policies that can create some unemployment. Interestingly, the research doesn't suggest that necessarily a higher minimum wage creates unemployment, at least at the wage rates that the US has. But it's important to remember that we are talking about a natural type of unemployment because an economy that relies, at least in some part, on markets which are ever changing, especially with the rise in globalization, is going to have some amount of changing types of jobs due to new technologies or changing types of jobs due to outsourcing. So we expect there to always be some amount of structural unemployment when things are as dynamic as they are. Now, this isn't to say that it's a good thing or that the government shouldn't try to reduce this, but to reduce structural unemployment, you would have to reduce all technological improvements, which throw some people out of work. You'd have to stop globalization and the benefits of specialization between countries. And so there's actually a huge cost to try to reduce structural unemployment when it comes from these sources. So economists generally like the idea more, if you want to help groups that are displaced by trade and globalization and new technologies, do so directly through government retraining programs or even just cash transfers That's a much better thing than slowing down trade or slowing down technological advances. As disruptive as they are, they have humongous benefits for the society, and the losers, so the winners outweigh the losers, and the losers can be compensated out of the winnings, and still there should be some left over. A quick word about unions. They are on the decline, or have been in the US for the last several decades. But a union, there's different types, but they're basically all associations of workers that bargains collectively with employers over wages, benefits, and working conditions. And some of them act to increase wages. Some of them act to increase wages by increasing the demand for the product they make. Some of them do it by restricting entry into a profession with licensing requirements. All in all, they seek to give a voice and give power to workers, which in our day and age is pretty important considering the huge increase in the power and size of corporate America. So we've had two things happen: the decline of unions and the rise of large corporations, which has disempowered workers to the point where economists are now suspecting that it's this monopoly power or monopsony power when it's firms that are buying labor, to be part of the reason that wages have stagnated, even though production and productivities remained really high or actually increased in the last few decades. So for those of you curious about the impact of minimum wage on unemployment and whether or not it creates lots of structural unemployment, the traditional argument goes like this. The higher the wage, the more the structural unemployment, right? You're not allowing markets to be at their equilibrium. You're pushing the wage rate far above or somewhat above this equilibrium. And so the number of people that are willing to supply their labor is high, and the number of people willing to demand or hire the workers is lower. So you have this amount, right? This amount of unemployed people, we call that structural unemployment. The issue is the US doesn't have a very high minimum wage, and so it's debatable whether or not that's true. Also, the US has a lot of large, powerful corporations, and it's well known if you keep going in economics that when that's true, a minimum wage or a price floor, as this is not going to actually impact employment decisions by this large, powerful firm. A good example of this is when Amazon increased its lowest worker pay substantially to $15 an hour, and this did not create any substantial or at all increase in unemployment. And there's important other research that suggests the opposite effect. At any rate, minimum wage in the US is relatively low and probably doesn't really matter. Very few people work at minimum wage. And if you're interested in looking at the research, it's by Alan Kruger and David Card. All right, time for a few practice questions. Jasmine has recently moved to Florida because she loves the warm climate. She's new to the area and will spend a few weeks looking for a job. What kind of unemployment is she experiencing? Pause it, think about it, and then I'll come to you with the answer. Here comes your answer. It is frictional unemployment. Another question for you. Which of the following people is unemployed? Jose, a full-time student but volunteers at a local food bank but is not paid. Deshaun quit his job to stay at home and take care of his newborn child. Wen-Ting was laid off from her previous job. So far, she has not been able to find another job in her field, although she sends out several resumes each week. David works 20 hours per week at McDonald's and is not interested in increasing his hours, or all of the above. All right, pause, think about it, and I'll come to you with the answer. All right, here comes the answer. By process of elimination, it's Wen-Ting. And we wonder what type of unemployment how do we know she's unemployed? She's actively looking for work and was laid off. And what type of unemployment is it? We're not sure if she's laid off because there's, like, her job got outsourced or there's a new technology. That would make her structurally unemployed. But there's another type of unemployment called cyclical unemployment. And if this economy is in a massive recession, she might be cyclically unemployed due to a downturn in the business cycle where a lot of people are experiencing the same thing she's experiencing. There's just not enough jobs to go around. So let's take our attention to cyclical unemployment. But before we do that, let's agree that frictional and structural are part of the natural rate of unemployment. In other words, we decided that both were to be expected to be in existence at any given moment in time. So the natural unemployment rate includes the two frictional and structural types of unemployment. Now, actual unemployment may or may not be at that natural rate. If it's above the natural rate due to a recession, we have frictional, structural, and cyclical unemployment to deal with. All right, so the cyclical unemployment, that's the stuff you see when people are in breadlines or massive amounts of unemployment, COVID-19 recession. There is a lot of people out of work. There are not enough jobs to go around. And when you have a ailing GDP, an ailing economy that's not producing very much, you're going to get firms laying off workers, and then the economy can't create more jobs. And so a lot of resources, like human resources, like workers, are idle. They're not able to work. And of course, unlike a machine, an idle human resource starves to death or has to resort to crime or increase in suicide. All these things we see are costs of higher levels of unemployment. So unemployment, just to be short and quick about it, we want less unemployment in the economy, both for production and standard of living reasons, but also for human suffering reasons. Another practice question: which of the following statements is true? A, the natural rate of unemployment equals a country's unemployment rate during a recession. B, the natural rate of unemployment equals the country's unemployment rate during an expansion. C, the natural rate of unemployment is the sum of frictional and structural unemployment. Or D, the natural rate of unemployment is the sum of frictional and cyclical unemployment. Pause, work the problem, and then we'll do the answer. Here comes your answer. Another practice question. Liliana, who was recently laid off from her job as an accountant as a result of an economic downturn, is she A, not unemployed, B, frictionally unemployed, C, structurally unemployed, or D, cyclically unemployed? Give it a minute, pause, work it, and then we'll come back with the answer. And here comes your answer. Economic downturn, aka recession, business cycle. She's cyclically unemployed.